let's go to the Word of God, and we're taking our text from Hebrews, the 10th chapter. I'm reading from the New Living Translation. And let us not neglect our meeting together, as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. And let us not neglect our meeting together, as some people already do. I'm going to be speaking today and the next couple of weeks on the subject of why people leave the church. Why people leave the church. September 21st, the day of our potluck, is National Back to Church Sunday. This is a time that the evangelical community around the country and actually around the world is dedicated to bringing people back into the fold. Now, it's obviously designed to mirror back to school. September is a time for people to, after a long, hot summer, to get back to school, get back into the swing of things. And so the churches of America and the world have attempted to parallel that and call for a time to get back to church. This week and next Sunday, I am going to be teaching on the subject of why people leave the church. So I'm going to switch from my preaching mode into my teaching mode because it's an important topic, not just to prepare us for the actual Back to Church Sunday that we want to participate in, but to lay out some good principle and foundational understandings about what happens in churches, how to grow the church, why people leave, what we can do about it. So this week and next week, I'm going to be speaking on this subject. I'm going to be teaching. So it is a time, in fact, to take notes, stir up questions in your mind, and really ponder it, because it's going to make us a better church. It's going to make you a better Christian. It's going to make you a more effective Christian. Why go after people who leave the church? This is the first question that we want to tackle. Why do we bother? If they left us, let them go. Should we be going after them? Why do we bother going after the church? Should we just let things be the way they are? If they want to come back, let them come back. If they don't, they don't. Well, the Bible speaks about the lost sheep and the shepherd. What man among you, if he had 100 sheep and has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open pasture and go after the one which he lost until he finds it? Okay, there seems to be the mandate of a shepherd's heart cares about the one that may have left. And I like this verse because it says that he leaves the 99 and goes after the lost until he finds it. He doesn't give up. It's not, well, I made a phone call. Well, I sent them a card. He pursues that person until he finds them. Now, I was not raised in Rhode Island. I was raised in Brooklyn, New York. And New York, this here is not a festival, by the way. This is kind of an average street. There's a lot of people in New York City, and there are a lot of churches in New York City. Now, I've been in the church nearly 40 years, and I've been a pastor for close to those 40 years. I wasn't raised in Swansea or Dighton. I wasn't raised in Pawtucket. And because I lived in an environment like this, I had some unique exposure and experiences to a variety of churches. I'm not saying these things to imply that I know it all, because I don't. I don't know it all. I've been in a variety of churches. I've seen countless styles, forms, denominations, large churches, small churches. I've been in many of them. I preached in many of them. And again, this doesn't mean that I know more. What it does mean is because of that, I've actually made many of the mistakes that I'm going to talk about. I've seen many mistakes, and I've made many of the mistakes myself. I'm attempting to share with you in this study here the things that happen in churches that prevent growth, that encourage and foster departures. I'm going to show you 6 reasons why people leave the church. Now, let me explain what I mean for that, because there are thousands of reasons why people can leave a church. Some are legitimate. Some are amazingly ridiculous. And people leave the church because they discern that there's false doctrine there, that it's an ungodly environment, and they leave. And then there's some that leave for the silliest reasons. And I've heard hundreds of such reasons, good and bad reasons. I know a guy who left because he didn't like the pastor's voice. Not mine. I wasn't the pastor. But honestly, it just irritated him. He didn't like hearing the pitch of his tone, just didn't like it. Those who know me know that I've been known to be somewhat controversial. I've been known to come up with an angle of scripture or a topic that is very different from things you may have heard before. Well, I've had people that have left my church and have left my life because of that. I had one guy who says, "Rev, I hear what you're saying, and it makes sense. The Bible does say that. But how come no one else seems to say that?" And he says, if what you're saying is true, then why aren't we hearing it from other pastors in other churches? I said, well, I can't answer that. But that was more than this man was willing to deal with. And he left. He left my church and he left my life. And when something like that happens, there are basically 3 choices. He could either say, well, you know what? I'm going to sit and listen and see, maybe God has something to say to me. That's one choice. Another choice is for the Rev to say, well, all right, I won't do that anymore. And those who know me know that ain't going to happen. The third choice is he can leave, which is what he did. But you can't have all 3. Something is going to give. So while there are thousands of reasons why people can leave a church, I have discovered that there are basically 6 reasons why most people will leave the church. So what I mean by that is a good 80%, a majority of people that leave the church will leave for one of these 6 reasons that I'm going to give you. Some of those reasons you can do something about. Some of those reasons you're not going to be able to do anything about. No matter how hard you try, you will not change it. You will not change the outcome. But it's important for us to be able to identify why people are leaving the church. The old edict, you can't fix it unless you know what it is. So it brings us to the next question. Should we go after people who leave the church? Should we even be bothering to do this? If they left for one of those reasons or a bad reason, maybe we shouldn't be doing anything. You just said there's some things, no matter what you do, it's not going to change the outcome. So should we even bother trying? You've said before, don't chase people who don't want to be caught. And a lot of people do that. They spend a whole lot of time trying to convince people to love you, to be with you, who will never love you or be with you. So if you're engaged in that, you are engaged in a futile exercise. More so, you're wasting your time and God's time on doing something that can be productive. There's a verse in Scripture in 1 John, the 2nd chapter. It talks about people who leave the church. And in this verse it says, these people left our churches, but they never really belonged with us. Otherwise, they would have stayed with us. When they left, it proved that they did not belong with us. Now, the writer of 1 John was speaking specifically against a cult. They were known as Gnostics. They were false prophets that had infiltrated the church. And in time, they left. And so the writer here is saying that those people that left because they never really were part of us to begin with. And the fact that they left proved that they weren't part of us. But again, in my many years, I've seen people, churches, pastors, take this verse and twist it and attempt to apply it to anybody who leaves your church. And we take this hostile stance that if you left the church, you were never really part of us to begin with. And the fact that you left the church proves that maybe you were never even saved. Because if you were saved, you would have stayed with us. And I've seen pastors preach that. And I've seen churches adopt that ugly spirit who believes that if anyone leaves a church, they're the enemy. But like we said, the enemy is not just anyone who happens to leave your church. We all are very familiar with this classic scene.
You don't have to answer that question.
I'll answer the question. You want answers?
I think I'm entitled to.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth.
Classic movie. That often is the attitude that churches adopt. They leave the church because they can't handle the truth. And if that is your position, and we usually apply this, by the way, to people who've been in the churches for a while. You come in for 2 weeks and you disappear, nobody thinks about you. But for that person who's kind of been around here for 5 years, 6, 7 years, all of a sudden they leave because they can't handle the truth. We're preaching the truth. We're giving the real gospel. We're calling for holy living, and they don't like it. And that's why they left. Leaving your church doesn't mean leaving the church. Not everyone that leaves your church means they're leaving the church. And so we have to adjust our thinking sometimes. Because if you think people who leave your church leave because they're backsliding, leave because they're of the devil, leave because they don't love God like you do, then obviously you're not going to do a whole lot to try to bring them back. Just because they leave your church doesn't make them the enemy. Just because they left your church doesn't mean they left the church of God. We ask the question, how can we make our church grow? We want the church to grow. How can we make the church grow? What can we do to make churches grow? I hear the questions all the time. It was questions that was asked when I came here. The better question, though, is often, what's stopping our church from growing? If you can figure out what's stopping your church from growing, you will be amazed at the growth that your church will have. In fact, you could do a whole lot of things right, but if you don't fix the problem of what's hindering your church, you'll be running around in circles. How do you close the back door? Because as many people that might come into your church, if there are certain things that don't happen, they slip out the back door. Metaphorically speaking, of course. Sometimes literally. We're familiar with a thermostat. When you set a thermostat, no matter what happens, the temperature is never going to go beyond what that thermostat is set at. And there are churches, there are pastors that have set their thermostat at a certain place, and because it's set at that place, that church will never go beyond that. It will never grow. Sometimes it's what we do and how we do that sets the thermostat, that keeps a church at a certain place. It could be the music. It could be your environment. It could be a parking situation. Many times the thermostat is a person. Don't go looking around. But there are people in your church. As long as they're there, they're going to have a lot to do with the thermostat that's set. And people and the church will not grow. That's why in getting to should we go after people that leave the church, some people who leave the church is the best thing that can happen to your church. Not that you don't love them, and it doesn't even mean that they're necessarily wrong or evil. But there are certain people that force your thermostat and will put a ceiling so that the church will not grow. We have certain expectations that we bring in that will set the thermostat. I've had people come up to me in the brick and they say, wow, I like this. I like a small church. And I understand what they mean by that. Of course, I'm thinking like, well, if you like a small church, you might not like us a year from now because we don't plan to stay small. So what happens? That person is here with a certain expectation. I want small. And if you get enough of those people, guess what? You got a thermostat now that will hinder, unconsciously prevent your church from growing because there are too many people there that don't see it that way, and they prefer to have it the way it is. So how do you close that back door? We talked about things like this, how we view newcomers. There are some churches that don't grow because we don't like new people. We like to see the crowd. We like the money that they may put in the offering, but we really don't want them messing with stuff too much. And so most new people was viewed right away as assets or liabilities. There are people, we see them just looking at them, and we say, we could use that person. It's usually on physical appearance. If they look like they're suit and tie and got money, we could use them. Let somebody come in here looks like a junkie. Let a transvestite walk through the door. How interested are we now in winning them? Or would we prefer that they go to the church down the block? Let me talk about a 3-Sunday rule, something to think about. When you see people in the church that have been here for a while and they miss 3 Sundays in a row, they're usually gone within a year. Now, I'm not talking about they're on vacation. I'm not talking about if they're sick, if there's an illness, something like that. I'm talking about 3 Sundays for no apparent reason. They've just stopped coming 3 Sundays in a row. Statistically, that person will be gone within a year. When I used to take long bus rides, we would pull into a stop station, and the bus driver would get out and just say, "Look at the person next to you." And we go have 20 minutes, coffee break, what have you. Everybody gets back in the bus. Now, the bus driver doesn't know everybody in there, but he assumes that you know the guy who was sitting next to you. And if you're there and the person that is sitting next to you is gone, well, you stop the bus and say, somebody's missing. Who is the person next to you in the church? I don't mean sitting next to you, of course. I mean, who is the person next to you in your life where that if you're missing, they would notice? And if they're missing, you do notice. This is what happens with that 3-Sunday rule. You don't go to church because something's going on in your life. You're discouraged, you're depressed, and you stay home. And you stay home for 2 weeks. Then you show up back in church, and it's like you were never even gone. Nobody called you while you were out. And when you got back, no one noticed that you were back. And you know what the devil says to that person's mind? They don't care about you. You could be dead. They wouldn't even know it. So why are you bothering with this church? Take notice of people who aren't here. Take notice of someone who's missing in action. Now, I don't mean go up to them and, "You weren't there Sunday. Where were you?" No, you don't do it that way. But when you see them, like, "Hey, missed you last week. So glad to see you." You don't have to get into their business, but that says something to them. That says, there's a people who care about me. There are people that I matter to. These are people that are less likely to leave in the first place. Let me move on real fast. There's been statistical studies on how and when people leave churches. And over the course of 1 year or 12 months, people leave the church at 3 specific times. Now, obviously, they can leave any time within a year, but they tend to leave at certain times in the course of 12 months. The highest dropout rate comes within the first 2 months. Most people who would come in as first-time guests, they hang around for a while. Most of them, if they're going to leave, they will leave within this first 2-month period. For some people, it's 2 weeks. For some people, it's 2 months. For some people, it's 2.5 months. But within that time range, most people will leave. That's the highest dropout rate. Then there is a second dropout period. And that happens within 6 months' time. So you have someone join the church, been here for 4 or 5 months, and you're thinking, wow, they're good. 6 months later, they're gone. And quite a few people leave at this 6-month range. And then there's a smaller departure toward the end of a 11, 12 months. You see a smaller group that tends to leave. Now, the thing about this is that they leave for different reasons. While they leave at different times, they don't all leave for the same reasons. People who leave during this first section, it often has to do with how they got here. They were aroused. They were excited. It was exciting. The preacher was crazy. He stomped his foot. They never seen anything like this. And so they're all riled up, and that's kind of what drew them in. And then after a while, it's like, yeah, okay, he's getting kind of tired. And they tend to leave. The second phase during the 6 months, they leave, but it's for a different reason now. They're leaving because they've been here for 6 months. They really don't know anybody. Been coming here for 6 months. I love the church, love the preaching, love the singing. Just really don't know a whole lot of people. And then a third smaller group, that has to do more with convenience and geography. You know, I love the church, love the people, but you know what? 40-minute drive in the snow is just too much. And they tend to leave for that reason. So let's deal with this first section. What can we do about that? Is there anything that we can do about that? If people have left within that time frame for that reason, what can be done about that? Well, if they responded because of the excitement, because it was spectacular, then the strategy for that is big events. They usually come in because of big events. This is when you see these Billy Graham crusades. Thousands of people run up to receive Christ. 2 months later, they're all gone because they were inspired. They were aroused. It was exciting, but it didn't stick. So you say, well, too bad, they're gone. No. What drew them there was the big events. So now if you have that kind of response, but you only do it once a year, then you're not going to draw a lot of people. So you need to do several within that 12-month period because of what we just said. Not all of them are going to stick. So the response to that is big events. The Bible actually alludes to this. There was a Hebrew holiday called Shavuot, which is also known as the Feast of Weeks. My time is getting through, so I'm going to zip through this. You shall count the weeks for yourself and begin to count 70 weeks from the time you begin to put the sickle to the standing grain, and then you shall celebrate the Feast of Weeks. So they were supposed to do this for 7 weeks, which results in 49 days, and then a celebration. That celebration is known to us as Pentecost, meaning 50, as in Pentagon, 5. Pentecost was, as we know, the day the church was born. And it was not surprising that God used this principle. He would send the Spirit on a holiday. Why? Well, there were a lot of people in town. And that's what we had in Acts 2. And the day of Pentecost came, all the people were in one place. Verse 6, and when this sound occurred, the crowd came together. What crowd? Well, there was a holiday going on. So there were lots of people around there. By the end of this service, so they who had received the word were baptized, and that they were added about 3,000 people. The first church was a mega church. So it capitalized on big events. Now, the churches of America actually have a couple big events already built in. Christmas. And then with Christmas, you can do a Christmas Eve service. You could do a Christmas dinner or party. So we kind of already have that established. And the brick churches had that. One of our biggest services is Christmas Eve service. The place is packed. It's a big event. Well, where are they after that? Well, they're gone. So we'll see them 12 months from now, or we can think of other big events that will draw the crowd. Easter is another built-in big event. And under that, you can have a Good Friday service. But there are other kinds of big event things you could do. There's Thanksgiving. There's Mother's Day. You can have cookouts. You can have movie night. What I mean by movie night is you don't just show any movie. But there were churches when the Passion of the Christ came out. Churches opened up their doors and played the Passion of the Christ for all to come in to see for free. Recently, there was a History Channel with the Bible series. I know churches that opened up the doors and showed that History Channel special of the Bible. It drew in people. A big event is an occasion, something conjured up to attract a lot of people at one time. Baptisms can be a big event. We've had some baptisms the other week. That's an occasion to tell somebody something special is going on. It's not going to be your same old dried out church service. Something special. Family members who will never come to church will come for your baptism. Maybe you should get baptized again just to bring folks here. You can have concerts or plays, Christian concerts, Christian plays. Something different, an occasion to invite people. Various seminars. We're going to be doing a marriage seminar. We're going to have guest speakers. We had the National Day of Prayer. Again, different occasions, services that give the potential to bring an extraordinary number of people, an above average attendance. Hence, Back to Church Sunday can serve as one of those opportunities that can reach the people that tend to come in this phase. All right, 6 reasons. I'm going to start now, and then we'll pick it up on next week. The first reason why people would leave the church is it's a bad match. The church just doesn't fit them. Now, this can be acceptable, it can be unacceptable, but it can be a reality. There are people that won't come to your church or will leave your church because it's a bad fit. It's too hot. It's too cold. I can't find a parking space. It's too far to drive. The preacher is too loud. The music is too loud. These are people that will leave because it's a bad fit. It doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. It doesn't mean they're doing it wrong. It just means it doesn't work. What the church needs to understand is while you should be a church for anybody, you're never going to be a church for everybody. Everybody is not going to dig your church. Everybody is not going to like the way you do church. What do you do about that? I've seen pastors and churches stop and hinder their growth trying to do something about this. When you try to be a church for everybody. And so you have people that come in and they don't speak English. So now we have to do something. Let's create a translation ministry that can translate to that person who doesn't speak English. And you come up with all of these things trying to please everybody. And what you end up with is a diluted vision, a divided focus. If someone speaks Portuguese and they don't speak English, well, you know what? This is not going to be the church for them. There's nothing I can do about that. I don't speak Portuguese. So, do I try to accommodate or be something that I'm not? Or do I accept and understand that this is not going to be the church for them? Again, go back to my example. You're too controversial. I don't like, you're saying stuff I never heard anybody say before. So should I stop doing that? If that's the way God made me, if that's the anointing that he gave me, should I stop doing that to try to accommodate somebody who's not getting what I'm saying? I do all that I can to make myself understandable, but I also get that not everybody's going to get me. Some of you folks right here don't get me yet. Okay, so you're not going to please everybody. You're not going to be a church for everybody. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to expound on that reason, and I'm going to give you 5 more reasons.
People get ready. Jesus is coming soon. We'll be coming home. People get ready. Jesus is coming to take from the world alone. People get ready. Jesus is coming to take from the world alone. People get